Superman, the original superhero, beloved throughout America and across the world, first appeared in 1938's Action Comics #1. With this kind of integrity comes a great creative control. Superman franchise has been rebooted several times, with every filmmaker giving their own uniqueness. But straying too far from the comics or sticking too close to it will cause controversy in the fandom either way. The original Superman movie became a global landmark for superhero movies for the years to come. Some scripts and outline are just too risky and expensive for Warner Bros. To release. Not to mention behind-the-scenes drama and creative differences can result in them pulling the plug before the films can see the light of day. In this video, we're gonna take a look at the cancelled Superman films in order of the original intended release date. I'm only gonna cover the Superman-related films, and not the team-up ones like Justice League Moral, and delving into both unused treatments and films that are already in development but ultimately scrapped. Be sure to watch until the end to dive deep into this realm of what could have been and find out how each films would have changed the course of superhero movies history, starting with Superman 3 Supergirl. The original plan for Superman 3 would have featured Brainiac and Supergirl. In this version, Kara wasn't Superman's cousin, but rather a random Kryptonian. She would have had a father-daughter relationship with Brainiac. It would also feature a romantic relationship between Clark and Kara, as they weren't related, which will serve as a romantic replacement to Lois Lane from the previous movie. In the final version of Superman 3, Superman's love interest is Lana Lang. It's unknown if Lana will still feature in this version. What will still feature in this film is Superman turning evil. Here he is being brainwashed by Brainiac, and there will be a fight scene of mind control Superman versus Supergirl, which will turn Superman back to the good side and start their romantic relationship. WB opposed this treatment, but the reasons was unknown. But looking at it, the film would have cost a lot in the VFX, costume, and set design department, especially for 1983, so they opted for a more smaller scale and rely on the comedic charisma of Richard Pryor on the final film. And Supergirl gets her own solo adventure in 1984, with TriStar Pictures producing. Superman 5 Reborn. After the failure of Superman 4 A Quest for Peace, Canon Films, who produced the film, got one last shot to make Superman with Christopher Reeve. Reeve, coming out of Superman 4, was hesitant to take on the project. He demands a good enough script and a decent enough budget like the first two films for the spectacle and visual effects. Director Albert Pune, who directed the 1990s Captain America, was attached and supposed to direct the film, with the writers of 1988's Superboy series Cary Bates and Mark Jones, along with Ilya Salkind, attached to write the script. The story would involve Superman dying and being resurrected in the battled Kryptonian city of Kandor. Clark wanted to confess his true feelings to Lois Lane, which he did only after Lois died in his arm courtesy of Brainiac, before discovering she is pregnant with his child, who would be the next Superman to defeat Brainiac. The Superman Reborn script will go through many revisions, eventually getting past Christopher Reeve's era and planned for a reboot. The second version of the script would have delved more into Clark's dual identity crisis, also a bigger focus on Clark's and Lois's relationship. Canon Films will eventually lost the rights to make Superman movies in 1993. With the rights on sale, producer John Peters, who produced Tim Burton's Batman, quickly picks it up, which becomes the most famous and imagination-capturing cancelled movies of all time, known as Superman Lives. This is the most talked about cancelled films of all time. On YouTube alone, you can find thousands of videos covering this film. It also spawned a documentary titled The Death of Superman Lives, What Happened. It made sense how a lot of people were intrigued by this film for the premise itself. It's ambitious, gigantic, and weird. Producer John Peters gave 3 conditions for Smith on writing the script. Superman can't fly, he won't wear his iconic costume, and he has to fight a giant spider on the 3rd act. Peters denied ever giving those first 2 conditions on the documentary. Smith's script would be given to various directors, until finally landing Tim Burton, but then immediately Burton scrapped Smith's script and shaping it more into his style. The film would have starred Nicolas Cage as Clark Kent, who is a very interesting choice. Peters said it was to convince the audience that Clark really did came from outer space, and that he's an alien trying to fit into human society. Joining him is Sandra Bullock as Lois Lane, Chris Rock as Jimmy Olsen, Kevin Spacey as Lex Luthor, and Christopher Walken as Brainiac. So the story evolves from the Superman Reborn script. now written by Rusty Strick, later replaced by Dan Gilroy. This story will still be based on the Death of Superman comic, as WB was very eager to adapt the comic since the early 90s. The film would have delved deep into Clark as a lonely outsider, working in the Daily Planet, and eventually falling in love with Lois Lane, also venturing with his buddy Jimmy Olsen. Throughout the film, you'll see Superman's suit evolve into many different forms as the story progresses, which signifies his evolvement as a character, plot-wise, and he would have a regeneration suit after he was resurrected. Fortress of Solitude will feature a puppet-like AI robot called Calle. The two primary villains of the film are Lex Luthor and Brainiac, who will work together and even merge body into becoming Lexiac. Superman would have died in the hands of Doomsday and resurrected with the regeneration suit, and finally fight the giant robot spider spawned by Lexiac. In the end, it was revealed that Lois was pregnant with Clark's child. Now, this film is very bloated with many elements, plot points, and characters that might not be cohesive if crammed into one film. Despite the film production already undergoing screen tests, concept arts, sets being built, and costumes made, the film would ultimately be cancelled, and it came down to 3 reasons. Batman and Robin underperformed at the box office, which makes WB nervous as this movie would have been a very different and risky take of Superman. Budget ballooned to $300 million. This film would have required tons of visual effects, which in the 90s wasn't as advanced as it is today, and the creative differences between Burton, the writers, and producer John Peters. Though this movie could go either way, but it's still intriguing nonetheless. It still captures my curiosity more than any Superman reboots that came after. Superman Flyby, written by J.J. Abrams. This was described to be a darker and might have been a more controversial take on the character. Superman Reborn and Superman Lives before this. This would also be based on the Death of Superman comic. In this version, Krypton still exists, and in a civil war between Jor-El and his brother Kal-El. Jor-El is a king instead of a scientist, therefore making Kal-El the Prince of Krypton. Kal-El will fulfill a prophecy that will end the civil war. But for the prophecy to be fulfilled, Kal-El was sent to Earth away from the violence of Krypton's war. Jor-El lost the battle to Kal-El and was sent to prison. Another focus of the film is Clark and the Kent family, fearing that their son will kill them after little Clark beats out the evil landlord of the Kent farm. So they teach Clark to control his powers, to not be so fast, strong, or powerful. In time, Kal-El's son Tyzor, also the cousin of Kal-El, would reach Earth and hunt him down, which will lead to Tyzor killing Superman for the Death of Superman comic adaptation part, and eventually resurrected. The final battle is Superman vs Kryptonian Mecha, controlled by Lex Luthor, who turns out to be a Kryptonian agent commanded by Tyzor. Superman defeated the robot by paying homage to 1978 Superman, with him going around the globe to knock the robot down. It ends on a cliffhanger, with Calle returning to Krypton to restore order to the planet. X-Men The Last Stand's Brett Ratner was attached as director, but then left, with Terminator Salvation's McGee replacing him. Jude Law and Josh Hartnett was tapped to play Superman, but Ratner wanted an unknown actor to play Superman, so we would see the character as just the character, and not the actor. Kerry Russell and Amy Adams was tapped to play Lois Lane, and Joel Edgerton as the villain Tyzor. Ultimately, Henry Cavill auditioned for the role, and did a screen test in the Superman suit. McGee would eventually leave the project in 2004. WB then tapped X-Men and X2's Bryan Singer as replacement. Singer then pitched his own idea, a continuation of Reeves' Superman 1 and 2, which we all know became Superman Returns, and the rest is history. Until Superman Returns, The Man of Steel. Before the release of Superman Returns in 2006, Warner Bros. Would announce the release date of the sequel for summer 2009, with Bryan Singer returning as director, and the majority of the cast returning to their respective roles. Titled Superman The Man of Steel, which turns to be the title of the DCEU reboot Man of Steel. Superman Returns made $400 million at the box office, which WB didn't consider a success. This makes them reconsider developing the sequel. Singer had already committed to his other projects, in particular 2008's Tom Cruise movie Valkyrie. The leaked plot tells the story years after the first movie, where the world has gotten used to Superman returning as Earth's protector. Meanwhile, in space, the Kryptonian island that Superman threw keeps growing to almost a sphere asteroid, which attracts a Kryptonian survivor that came to the island in a ship from far away. Superman checks out this entity and realizes he is another Kryptonian survivor like himself. But it turns out this Kryptonian survivor is an artificial intelligence known as, you guessed it, Brainiac. It was revealed that Brainiac caused the destruction of Krypton. Brainiac extracts his consciousness into the body of Superman's son, Jason, becoming a version of Bizarro. Superman stops Brainiac in a fight with his son's possessed body. With this film being on hold for so long, Brandon Routh's contract came to an end. He would eventually reprise his role as older Superman in CW's crossover event, Crisis on Infinite Earths. Man of Steel 2, the original Superman standalone sequel in development by Zack Snyder after the first film. Zack Snyder had always pitched Batman to feature in his second Superman movie, with the focus still on Superman. But with Marvel releasing The Avengers a year prior to Man of Steel to a whopping $1 billion in box office, eventually the film becomes Batman v Superman. That sets up 2017's Justice League. Recently, Man of Steel 2 is in production again. Planned Henry Cavill's second solo outing after he reprised the role in Black Adam. Over a decade after Man of Steel, many directors had expressed interest to directing this film, including Kick-Ass and Kingsman's director Matthew Vaughn, Mission Impossible Fallout's Christopher McQuarrie, and Peaky Blinders' Steven Knight, who came very close. Knight has pitched a script to DC Studios that once again included Brainiac as a villain. Fortunately, the higher-ups at DC and Warner Brothers didn't like Knight's script and decided to reboot the entire universe with James Gunn's Superman Legacy, now retitled Superman in 2025. Black Adam 2. Post-credit scene of Black Adam hints at the continuation for Johnson's character, where Henry Cavill's Superman will take on Johnson's Black Adam. But it's not just gonna be two characters clashing. The plan was to make several Black Adam and Superman solo movies before they eventually clash in a crossover movie. Also, the second film will set up Black Adam as a Thanos-level threat to the DCEU, the final boss if you will. The film got axed after the first film earned only $400 million, relative to the budget of $200 million, which was short of WB's expectations. And with the DCEU reset, even Johnson's Seven Brooks production company, who successfully brought Henry Cavill back in Black Adam, couldn't bring this film back into light. Failure to make the second film would push The Rock to return to professional wrestling to fight a different kind of Superman as a different kind of final boss. Ta-Nehisi Coates and J.J. Abrams' Superman. In 2021, it was announced that J.J. Abrams will write an African-American Superman story along with author Ta-Nehisi Coates, set in a modern America divided by politics and racism. Clark Kent is struggling with his own identity as an alien living in America. I could see them drawing inspiration from the comics Superman and Nation Divided, or borrowing some elements from Black Lightning. Michael B. Jordan was fan-casted a lot to play Clark Kent based on the comics version of Val Zod's Superman. The status of this film is still pretty much in the air. With James Gunn's Superman Legacy coming out next year, it's highly unlikely that we'll see this film come to light anytime soon. When Gunn was asked about this on Twitter, if the film was still in development, he said yes as an Elseworld story, just like Batman and the Joker. If cancelled, this would be Abrams' second failed attempt at bringing his vision of the Man of Steel to the big screen. Supergirl. Sasha Calle's planned solo outing after the events of the Flash movie started in August of 2018. A film centered around the character was announced to be in development, with Oren Uziel of Cloverfield Paradox and Mortal Kombat hired as screenwriter for the project. This was when The Flash was still in production. But with the cancellation of the Batgirl movie and DC reset by James Gunn, plus the casting of Mia Alcox in DCU's Supergirl the Woman of Tomorrow, would ultimately nail this film in the coffin of the many unmade DCEU films. It's kind of a miss as Sasha Calle wouldn't have the chance to shine on her own as Supergirl, and will only be remembered in that film with a problematic actor and bad CGI. Sasha Calle was one of the great parts of the film. Despite her limited screen time, she brought a different, albeit a more comic demeanor of Kara Zor-El. So, which ones of these films would you have liked to see the most? Comment below. These outlines build an imaginative films in your head and makes you wonder. At times, it can be more interesting than seeing a released film. It's funny how Brainiac has yet to make his big screen debut, yet he's already been planned to appear since 1983. As always, thank you for watching the video. See you in the next one.